So, imagine for a second that you are holding a map,
Okay.
and you've been using this map to navigate your entire life for, I don't know, 40, maybe 50 years.
Right, a long time.
Yeah, a really long time. You've planned your career turns based on it, your relationships, where you live, even your retirement.
All based on this one map.
Exactly, all based on this map. And then one random Tuesday, you just look down and realize the map is upside down.
Wow.
And not only is it upside down, it's actually a map for a completely different city than the one you're living in.
That is, that is a terrifying thought.
Right.
It's like realizing you've been reading the instructions for a toaster while you're trying to fix a jet engine.
That is a perfect way to put it. And that is the exact reality for the subject of our deep dive today.
Yeah, we're getting into some really heavy but fascinating stuff.
We really are. We are looking at a book that is part forensic investigation, part memoir, and frankly, just a scathing indictment of the modern mental health system.
Oh, absolute skate.
It's called Misdiagnosed. It was written by Lee Hopkins and published just this year, 2025, by Degrees 138.
And, calling this a memoir almost feels a bit too soft, doesn't it?
Yeah, it doesn't quite capture the weight of it.
No, not at all. Hopkins himself actually calls it an autopsy of a living life.
An autopsy of a living life? That's intense.
Because he spent decades,
Yeah.
literally 60 years of his life, being treated for bipolar 2 and treatment-resistant depression.
60 years?
Yeah. He took the pills, he did the therapy, he lived with all that stigma, only to find out at age 66 that he was actually AuDHD the whole time.
AuDHD meaning a combination of autism and ADHD.
Exactly.
The whole time.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack how that even happens. How does a massive medical system filled with highly educated professionals miss the mark by that wide of a margin?
For that long.
For that long. We're going to look at the mechanics of masking, which, as we'll see, is way more complex than just faking it.
Oh, totally.
And we'll look at the specific friction of the AuDHD brain. We also, we need to talk about the spreadsheets of death.
Oh, man, we are definitely getting to the spreadsheets.
I have to.
Just a quick heads up for everyone listening. We are going to touch on some heavy themes today. Things like suicide ideation and systemic medical negligence.
Yeah. It gets dark in places.
It does. But stick with us, because the payoff of this story is actually about liberation. It's about finally finding the right map.
Let's start at the bottom then, because the book doesn't open with the big solution or the happy ending.
No, it starts in a pretty bleak place.
It opens with what he calls the broken person certificate,
Right. Hopkins places us right in a Centrelink office in Australia.
which is the welfare department there.
Exactly. And he paints this picture of the waiting room that is just visceral. He describes the paint color on the walls as bureaucratic beige, #47.
Which is just the perfect description for a room that's basically designed to drain your will to live.
Total.
It's that specific shade of tan that suggests, hope is an extra charge you can't afford.
He's there to get approved for a disability pension because he simply cannot function in the workforce anymore.
He's completely burnt out.
Burnt out, broke. And the clerk stamps his file, looks at him, and says, "You're approved." And Hopkins describes this incredibly bizarre cocktail of emotions in that exact moment.
Because on one hand, it's relief. He can eat. He has money to survive.
Right. But on the other hand, it's this heavy, hot shame.
Because in that moment, the government has officially validated his worst internal narrative. They've basically handed him a legal document that says, yes, we agree, your brain is fundamentally broken.
You are validly defective.
Exactly.
And this is where we really see how dangerous a wrong diagnosis can be. Because he takes that label of defect and he operationalizes it.
He really leans into it.
This is the part that just stuck with me for days. He goes home from that office, sits at his computer, and opens up a blank Excel spreadsheet.
The famous spreadsheet. He names it Life Expectancy Calculations Bipolar.xlsx.
I swear I didn't know whether to laugh or cry when I read this part. It's so dark, but it's so...
It's so logical.
Yes. Why does he do this?
Well, this is actually our first real clue that we aren't dealing with a typical neurotypical brain.
How so?
An autistic brain often craves data, certainty, and patterns, right? Especially to manage anxiety. So he goes online and looks up the actuarial tables.
The mortality rates.
Yeah. And the research suggests that men with bipolar 2 lose about 11 to 15 years of life expectancy.
Just shaved right off the top.
Right. And Hopkins is 45 at the time. So he does the math, he splits the difference, and he calculates that he has roughly 17 years left to live.
17 years. He basically builds himself a countdown clock.
He does. But the crazy part is, he doesn't treat it like a tragedy. He treats it like a project manager.
He really does.
He plans his lack of retirement savings because, I mean, why save money if you won't be there to spend it?
Makes sense on paper.
He plans his relationships, specifically avoiding any long-term commitments, because he views himself as this sinking ship. He doesn't want to drag anyone else down.
He calls death administrative housekeeping.
Administrative housekeeping. It's so detached.
It's like he's talking about filing his taxes, not his own mortality.
But here's the kicker. And this is a key insight from the book that just completely flips the script on everything.
Okay.
He later realizes that those statistics he based his whole life on, they were contaminated.
Contaminated how? Like the researchers used bad data.
Well, Hopkins argues that the mortality rate in those massive studies might not actually be from bipolar disorder itself.
Then what is it from?
He asks this brilliant question. How many people in those historical data sets were actually exactly like him?
Oh, wow.
Right. Undiagnosed neurodivergent people who didn't die from a mood disorder. They died from the sheer physiological stress of trying to be neurotypical in a world that wasn't built for them.
That is mind-blowing. So the statistic isn't measuring the lethality of the disease, it's measuring the lethality of the mismatch.
Precisely. It's measuring the physical cost of masking. It's like if you source a diesel engine to run on unleaded gas, it's going to break down way sooner.
But that doesn't mean the engine was diseased.
Exactly. It just means it was fueled wrong.
That is such a perfect segue to talk about masking. Because I think a lot of people, myself included, before I read this, hear the term masking and think, oh, it's just being polite.
Like everyone fakes a smile at a boring dinner party.
Right. But Hopkins describes it as something much, much more parasitic than that.
He really does. He uses this great analogy of the universal neurotypical translator.
I loved this part.
Imagine you are dropped into a foreign country. You technically know the grammar of the language, but you don't know any of the idioms, the slang, or the hidden cultural rules.
And the locals are actively hostile if you get it wrong. They think you're being intentionally rude or just weird.
Right. So to survive, you build this piece of software in your brain. Every single time someone speaks to you, you have to run their words through the translator.
You have to analyze the subtext.
Calculate the appropriate facial expression. You're constantly asking yourself, am I blinking too much? Am I not blinking enough?
Am I making the right amount of eye contact?
Exactly. You select the right tone of voice, and only then do you output your response.
And you have to do this all in milliseconds, 24 hours a day.
It's like being a method actor who is terrified that if they ever break character, they'll be completely exiled. And here is the actual science of it.
Yeah.
Running that software consumes a massive amount of glucose and cognitive energy.
It's a physical drain.
It's not just tiring in an emotional sense. It is physiologically incredibly expensive. You are running high-end video editing software on a laptop from 2010.
The fan is just spinning out of control.
The fan is screaming, the battery is melting.
Which perfectly explains the contradiction of his career. Because reading his bio, he wasn't just hiding in a basement his whole life.
No, he was very active.
He was in the Royal Australian Air Force. He was successful. And you'd think the military would be an absolute nightmare for someone with sensory issues.
You really would think so. But for many undiagnosed autistic people, the military is actually a huge relief. Hopkins calls it graduate-level masking.
A relief. How so?
Think about what the military actually provides. It acts as an external exoskeleton for your executive function.
Oh, I see.
You don't have to decide what to wear. There's a uniform. You don't have to decide your daily schedule. It's literally posted on the wall.
The hierarchy is incredibly clear.
Yes. You know exactly who you're supposed to salute and who you're supposed to command. There is no subtext.
So the military does all the structuring that his brain was struggling to do on its own.
Exactly. For an AuDHD brain that constantly battles ambiguity and chaos, the rigid structure of the RAAF essentially outsourced his executive function. It allowed him to perform competency perfectly because the rules were so explicit.
Whereas in the civilian world, the rules are totally vague.
Completely vague.
Yeah.
But you can't run that high-intensity simulation forever. Eventually, the battery dies.
And that leads us straight to the actual mechanism of his misdiagnosis. Hopkins describes these intense cycles he would go through. He would mask incredibly hard, work hard, run businesses, be hyper-productive because the sheer adrenaline of masking was driving him forward.
And to a psychiatrist, what does that look like?
It looks exactly like hypomania
What?
or mania, high energy, rapid speech, intensity.
Correct. And then, inevitably, his brain would just hit the blue screen of death, total and complete burnout.
He'd withdraw and sleep for days.
Unable to speak or even move. And to a psychiatrist, what does that look like?
Major depression.
Yeah, exactly. Highs and lows, mania and depression.
Yeah.
Boom, you have bipolar.
But they were completely missing the root cause. The high wasn't some chemical mania. It was an adrenaline-fueled performance just to survive.
Yes.
And the low wasn't a chemical depression. It was just total exhaustion.
There's this line in the book that sums it up perfectly. Hopkins says they were treating the costume, not the person wearing it.
Treated in the costume.
They saw the behavior, the smoke, but they completely misunderstood the fire that was causing it.
That is such a crucial distinction for anyone listening right now who feels like their treatment plan just isn't working. You really have to step back and ask, are we treating the symptom or the source?
Absolutely. And speaking of the source, we have to talk about the geographic cure.
Oh, yes. Because usually when someone says, I'm moving to Southeast Asia to fix all my problems, we all kind of roll our eyes.
Right. It's the classic trope of running away from your problems.
The whole eat, pray, love fantasy, I'll go find myself in an ashram.
But Hopkins didn't move to Vietnam for spiritual enlightenment. He moved because he was flat broke.
Pure economic desperation.
He simply couldn't afford rent and food in Adelaide on his tiny pension. So he packs up and moves to Alat, Vietnam. And a really strange thing happens around the 3-month mark.
He says he forgot to be depressed.
Which is wild.
Which, if you look at the strict medical model of bipolar as a permanent endogenous chemical imbalance, that shouldn't even be possible. You can't just move away from a disease like diabetes.
Exactly. You can't geographic cure a true chemical imbalance like that. And he has this amazing visual proof of this shift in his mind.
His photography.
Yes. He talks about his photography. Back in Adelaide, during his decades of treatment, his photos were incredibly stark, black and white.
Very empty landscapes.
No people at all.
He says his perception had literally narrowed to a tunnel. He was just trying to survive.
But in Vietnam, the color comes rushing back. We're talking vibrant reds, deep blues, busy street markets, faces everywhere. He says his peripheral vision physically widened.
So explain this to me. How does a simple change in zip code cure what doctors called a chemical imbalance? What is actually happening in his brain there?
This brings us to a really fascinating concept called person-environment fit.
Okay.
Hopkins references some heavy research in the book here, including Joanna Moncrief's massive 2022 umbrella review on serotonin.
The one that challenged the whole chemical imbalance theory.
Exactly. It challenged the idea that depression is just a biological error in the brain. Hopkins argues that his depression wasn't a broken brain. It was a perfectly reasonable response to an unreasonable environment.
Unreasonable in what way, though? Because Adelaide is a very nice city. It's not a war zone.
It's definitely not a war zone, but for his specific nervous system, it was incredibly hostile.
Ah, I see.
Think about the sensory load of a modern Western city, the constant cost of living anxiety, the relentless pressure to be something or do something productive.
And the subtle, unspoken rules of Australian social etiquette.
Exactly. All of that creates incredibly high friction for an autistic person.
And Vietnam didn't have that friction.
Vietnam removed the specific stressors that triggered his AuDHD. First off, it was way cheaper, so the sheer survival anxiety just vanished.
Right.
But more importantly, the culture allowed him to just be the eccentric foreigner.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
The pressure to mask completely dropped because nobody expected him to follow the local Vietnamese social codes perfectly anyway. He was an outsider, and that was fine.
It's like taking a penguin out of the Sahara Desert and finally putting it in the Arctic. Suddenly, the penguin isn't acting all sick and lethargic anymore.
That is the absolute perfect analogy. And for 30 years, these doctors had basically been trying to give the penguin antidepressants to handle the extreme heat instead of just moving the penguin to the ice.
But here's the thing that really gets me. He's in Vietnam, right? He's happy, his photography is vibrant, he's functioning, but he still doesn't know.
He has no idea.
He still thinks he's a bipolar guy who just got lucky. He is 66 years old at this point. When does the penny finally drop?
It happens in a simple Zoom call, and it's so casual it almost hurts. He's talking to a friend back home who happens to be a psychologist.
Okay.
She's watching him on camera, listening to him describe his life and his habits, and she just stops him and asks, Lee, has it ever occurred to you that you might be neurodivergent?
And his reaction is immediate denial, right?
Total, utter denial. He literally laughs at her. He says, I can't be autistic. I was an officer in the RAF. I ran my own companies. I understand sarcasm perfectly. I look people right in the eye.
Which highlights the absolute tragedy of stereotypes. We all have this very specific Hollywood version of what autism looks like.
The Rain Man stereotype.
Yeah.
Counting toothpicks on the floor.
Exactly.
And his friend just stops him right there. She says, forget the stereotypes. Let's look at the actual adult masking criteria. And she walks him through the checklist point by point.
Let's run through that list right now because I have a feeling some people listening might recognize themselves here.
Absolutely. First up, severe social exhaustion. Not just being a little introverted, but requiring days of darkroom isolation to recover from a simple 2-hour social event.
Check. Next is sensory overwhelm. Things like the fluorescent lights at the grocery store actually making you physically angry. Or the texture of a specific shirt making it impossible to form a coherent thought.
Check. And then the big one. The complete reinterpretation of his lifelong mood swings. She reframed his entire medical history in about 5 minutes.
Those bipolar lows.
Those were autistic shutdowns from severe sensory overload.
And those manic highs.
That was just ADHD hyperfocus.
It's the AuDHD combo, and Hopkins calls this specific combination a limited edition collector's item because the two conditions actually fight each other constantly. This was the most fascinating part to me, this absolute civil war happening inside the brain.
It really is a paradox. Think about it. The autism side of the brain craves routine, sameness, and predictability. It wants to eat the exact same breakfast every single day.
But the ADHD side craves novelty, dopamine, and chaos. It wants to burn the kitchen down and go find a brand new restaurant.
Exactly. So you have a brain that is constantly agonizingly bored by routine, but at the same time, completely terrified of change.
It's like driving a car with one foot slammed on the gas and the other foot slammed on the brake. You're revving the engine, you're making a ton of noise, you're burning through all this fuel, but you aren't actually moving anywhere.
And eventually, the engine just blows.
And that blown engine is exactly what the doctors confidently labeled depression.
Yep.
When he finally realized this, that he wasn't broken, he was just operating under a conflicting set of instructions, he says it was like a gravity in the room completely changed. He writes, square peg, meet round hole, the hole was never the problem.
It completely shifts the blame from the individual's character to the environmental fit.
But inevitably, this realization leads to anger. I mean, Hopkins is a very smart guy. He's articulate. He saw dozens of top-tier psychiatrists over 40 years. How did every single one of them miss it?
This is definitely the most damning part of the entire book, and it touches on some deep systemic bias in medicine. Hopkins points out that his specific experience perfectly mirrors the experience of many late-diagnosed women.
Wait, how does a 66-year-old male military veteran mirror the experience of women?
Because of what researchers call the female phenotype of autism. Historically, almost all autism studies focused entirely on young, hyperactive white boys.
That became the standard model.
Right, the standard model. Girls, however, are socialized from birth to prioritize social harmony. They were taught to be quiet, to be accommodating, to be good.
So they learn how to mask much earlier, much better than boys do.
Exactly. They fly completely under the radar because they are fundamentally better actors out of necessity. Hopkins had that exact same diagnostic trajectory because he learned that exact same high-level masking in the military.
He presented too well.
He presented perfectly. He made firm eye contact, he was polite, he was articulate.
So when he walked into a doctor's office in crisis,
the doctor unconsciously ticked the not autistic box in the first 10 seconds of meeting him because he didn't look autistic according to those outdated textbooks from 1980. And once that specific box is ticked, the doctor is forced to find another explanation for why this person is suffering so much. So they inevitably land on the mood disorders, major depression, bipolar, borderline personality disorder.
And the treatment for those misdiagnoses isn't just neutral. It's not like taking a sugar pill. It's actively harmful. Hopkins calls it the pharmacy of failure.
It's truly devastating. He lists out the cocktail of medications he was put on over the years: lithium, high-dose SSRIs, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers. Plus, he did decades of cognitive behavioral therapy.
And literally none of it worked.
Well, it worked in the sense that it successfully sedated him. He says the medications sanded down his personality. They essentially turned him into acceptable office furniture.
Acceptable office furniture,
He
God.
was compliant, he wasn't making a fuss, but he wasn't really alive.
And the CBT part really struck a chord with me because CBT is all about challenging your thoughts, right?
Right. The therapist says, "Why do you feel anxious in this supermarket? Let's examine that. It's irrational."
But for an autistic person, the supermarket is overwhelmingly loud and painfully bright. The anxiety isn't an irrational thought loop. It's a real-time sensory processing issue.
Exactly. Telling an autistic person that their actual physical sensory pain is just a negative thought pattern is effectively medical gaslighting.
That is so heavy. You're basically being told by experts that your own reality is wrong for decades.
And that is exactly why his suicide ideation was so strong for so long. He wasn't planning to die because of some chemical imbalance in his brain.
He was planning to die because he was exhausted from being gaslit by his own medical team.
He couldn't trust his own reception of reality anymore.
So let's bring it all back to the present. He finally gets the correct diagnosis. He understands the map he's holding. He deletes the spreadsheet.
He deletes the file. He realizes that actually he has no idea when he's going to die.
Which is terrifying in its own way, but also...
It's total freedom. It's the very first time in his entire life that the future is just an open road instead of a dead end.
He ends the book with a question that I think is really going to keep me up tonight. And I want to leave our listeners with this thought.
It's the question that just lingers over the whole story.
If psychiatry could get it this catastrophically wrong for one highly intelligent, articulate man, if they could treat him for the completely wrong disease for 60 years, how many other people are out there right now?
How many people are wandering around today heavily medicated, completely exhausted, thinking their brain is broken, carrying a diagnosis that actually belongs to someone else?
It really makes you wonder if you are listening to this right now and you've been struggling with a treatment plan that just doesn't feel right, or you've been given a label that doesn't quite fit your reality. Maybe the problem isn't actually you. Maybe you're just a penguin in the Sahara.
And maybe it's time to check if you're holding your map upside down.
That's it for this deep dive into Misdiagnosed by Lee Hopkins. Check your maps, everyone. Thanks for listening.